So Jeff Carlisle, Kasey, Keller, Julien with us to discuss this now official hiring. And Jeff, I want to start with you because you got a great article over at ESPN.com that explains kind of how this all came together. From that article, what was most impressive, most surprising to you about how the U.S. Soccer Federation was able to, at the end of the day, pull this off?
Well, I think it was just the level of interest that there was in this particular job. I think that's always been a bit of a mystery, just how attractive this job was. And, to hear some of the USSF higher-ups describe it, they put their candidates into three buckets. Bucket three was kind of the kind of candidate they've gone for in the past. Bucket two was kind of a stretch, and then bucket one was what they called super stretch. And that was the Jurgen Klopps of the world and the Mauricio Pochettinos of the world as well. And such was the level of interest, even in the tier one bucket, that they didn't even get through all of the tier two candidates. So that to me was a little bit surprising. The money was a little bit surprising as well. Pochettino, from what we're told, is going to get $6 million a year, but he's also going to get a chunk of money from Chelsea as well. He's going to be made whole in the end. And then also just to see the USSF kind of employ donors and sponsors to make up the difference as well in terms of money. So it really was a team effort. The Federation had hinted prior that they had the money to do this. This was not going to be an issue where they just couldn't afford their preferred candidate. In the end, they pulled money from quite a few buckets, and they were able to get this deal done. But just the level of interest for me was the big surprise.
Herc, there's probably not a show out there. In fact, I know there's not a show out there that has criticized the U.S. Soccer Federation more than this one. But you look at it now, certainly on the women's side, you can say they got the best manager in international football. You can at least try to start and make the argument that on the men's side, if you're going off resumes, they've got one of, if not the best managers in international football. How much credit we got to give this federation?
Immense credit. And you're right. We've criticized U.S. soccer, the U.S. men's national team, and the women's team at times, probably more than any other show around or any network around. But we have to give them their flowers when they're deserved. They went out and made Mauricio Pochettino one of the highest paid managers in the world in the international game. In the international game, if you run the numbers from last World Cup, Hansi Flick, no longer around, he was the highest. And it was about 6-something. And after that, it was everybody else. Here you have Mauricio Pochettino, $6 million annually. You go around and you look at, Marcelo Bielsa, $4 million. Dorival Jr., $4 million. You just went out and said, we want to do something important. We have to do something important now, the investment. And they went out and, through Ken Griffin, who was a CEO of Citadel, it's a hedge fund. Do your research if you want there. If you guys
Google.
If you guys know about GameStop and all that good stuff, great stuff. Political backer, and said, hey, we need this money. Can you make it happen? And he came through. When people asked where would the money come from, U.S. Soccer found a way. And in finding a way, you give this team, that I think has rich material, the best possible resource to explode said material. So we could sit here and fault them for the many mistakes of the past. Many mistakes. But they completely knocked it out the park on the women's side with Emma Hayes, highest paid manager in the world on the women's side, best manager in the world, I would say. And now have done so on the men's side as well.
So this news has kind of been percolating for a while. And Kasey, I know you've been hesitant to talk about it. You said until it was official. So now that it's official, how much better do you think Mauricio Pochettino can actually make this U.S. men's national team?
Well, I think the thing that I really like about this hiring is that it kind of hits the complete reset button. That there's not winners and losers in this. It's simply a guy that comes in from a level of experience at the highest level in club football and is then able to use that experience to and not with guys, I coached them at the youth level or I did this or that. No, he's coming in, and I think it's a complete reset, which is what we've seen since the World Cup. Exactly what the U.S. men's national team needs is a complete reset. So there's going to be veteran players who maybe won't get the opportunities straight off because they're kind of a known quantity. There'll be young players that get opportunities because this manager and his staff are going to have to kind of look a little deeper than maybe he's had to look in the past, because there's guys that clearly there's going to be guys in this program that he knows nothing about. He's going to be doing a bunch of research. I mean, the rumor is he's going to be staying in Europe, which probably makes the most sense right now in particular, because 99% of his squad are playing in Europe. And so he's going to have to spend a lot of time going around, meeting players, watching them, and kind of seeing, kind of what he feels he has to work with. Because there's been a lot of talk, and Herc, you just alluded to it as well, that there's a lot of talent here. But let's be honest, that talent has not come to the forefront in the last, or let's just say since the World Cup. There was this thought that there was going to be this step forward. Well, it's been a step back. And so now it's going to be up to Pochettino and his staff to see if he can get, some of that potential onto the pitch in the form of results.
Jules, I wonder about the reaction over in Europe, especially in England, where we know that Pochettino, certainly in the last couple of weeks, was linked to the national team job. What are they saying about this appointment over there? And are you at all surprised that he ended up here in this job, given the resume that he has, that he shouldn't have maybe gotten a better job or a club job?
I mean, the reaction here, and I did a BBC radio show not that long ago tonight, and the question was, is this a step back for him, or is it a step forward in his own career? And I think there was a time where you could look at international football coming from club football and thinking, okay, this is pre-retirement. And back in the day, you could have maybe seen that way. I think in this case, and I think the World Cup being on home soil in the US was a massive appeal for him. I'm not sure if the World Cup had been anywhere else in the world, if he would have taken the job. And I suspect, of all the interest that Jeff mentioned, if that was also the main appeal for all those guys from Klopp and Benitez and Zidane and Xavi and Tuchel and Graham Potter and whoever you want, who all in a way or another were connected to this job, it was mostly because of the World Cup on home soil, because this will be something very, very special to experience and to be part of, especially if the US men's national team does well. So that's the first thing. Personally, I don't see it as a step back. I see it more as a step forward, or at least something different that Poch, after two, let's say, disappointing experiences. The one at PSG was okayish because he had a front three of Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe, and in the end, in 18 months, he won one French Cup and one league title, which is good, but we expected more, especially in the Champions League. And let's not bring the Bernabeu and what happened that night. I was there, and I still wake up at night having nightmares. So, and Chelsea was a failure. It was not all on him. I think he was probably more of a victim of the system at the club and what didn't work at all at the club. But I'm not sure we can put everything that happened in Chelsea in the last year just on Pochettino. So I see it more as a step forward or something that he wanted to try differently than a step back.
See, Jules, that's why I think it's a step back and a massive gamble if you're Mauricio Pochettino. This isn't, Hollywood actor who does movies goes to TV type of deal. This is a massive gamble after everything you just highlighted. If the U.S. men's national team experience doesn't go well for him, that's a blow up in your face scenario for Mauricio Pochettino and the next job.
What if it does go well?
Well, if it does go well, he's beyond 2026, right? And there are probably bigger national teams who are going to look at him. And the U.S. men's national team will have to protect themselves in that way. If he was already on the radar of England, what could come about if he does great things with, Kasey mentioned, a good sense of material, but certainly not the most talented in terms of world football. If he does well, certainly others will be knocking. But if things go wrong, as the host country for the U.S. men's national, Mauricio Pochettino, we could be looking at a situation where Pochettino's going to be finding it very difficult to find a job.
Yeah, you're talking about his future, though. If we focus on his past and kind of the resume, and you see the clubs where he's coached, and Jules is just going through it there, obviously Southampton aside, but when you're talking about Spurs, when you're talking about Chelsea, my gosh, when you're talking about what he had at PSG, he has the best players in the world. He's coaching the best players in the world. Kasey, he's not going to have the best players in the world when he's managing the U.S. men's national team. Is that at all a concern for you?
Well, I think what he's going to have to really do is he's going to have to go back to the days at Espanyol and the days at Southampton, where you had good squads, but you made squads better than what people thought they could be. Obviously, Jules mentioned, the disappointments at PSG, where the idea was he going to be the guy that was going to finally win the Champions League with the players that he has. Okay, he wasn't able to do that. He did some great things at Tottenham. Look, Tottenham was in that situation where they were the 7th or 8th highest payroll, and they got them into a Champions League final, fighting for league titles, qualifying for Champions League, kind of punching above the weight, let's say. And I think that's really what I think what U.S. soccer is looking forward to. Is this a guy that can take a good squad and make it a great team? Or is it we know it's not a guy right now with this squad. Let's say you go into the French squad, or you go into the Brazil squad right now that is struggling, and there's an expectation immediately that you can win a World Cup. I don't think that's the expectation with this squad. The expectation is, can you make them better than they've achieved with the players you have? And the big difference, as we all know, between club football and international football, I can't go sign 10 players from 160 different countries. I have what I have, who have passports, and I have to make the best of who's available for me at that point in time. And I think some of the difficulties at Chelsea, some of the political stuff dealing with Daniel Levy at Tottenham, some of the stuff that obviously happened to him at Chelsea and PSG, he'll have to kind of dive into the difficulties of some of these last couple years, I think, to really, take the most out of a squad that is, significantly different, based on talent level. Again, if you're the manager of the French squad, you have a different talent pool to choose from. With the U.S. team, maybe somebody's not playing in their club team, but they're still the best option for you with the national team. That isn't necessarily the case with probably the top 10 to 15 countries in the world.
Jeff, to the case that Kasey is making there about the expectations that the Federation might have. Obviously, you shell out $6 million a year. You'd assume there'd be some big expectations. What do you get a sense are the expectations for what Mauricio Pochettino will be able to do with this team from the Federation side?
Well, I think at minimum, it's to make the quarterfinals of a World Cup. Basically the squad made it to the round of 16 in Qatar. And the expectation was that, okay, they're going to take the next step. They're going to grow. They're going to be more cohesive as a team. Some new guys are going to come through, and on home soil, they're going to at least make a quarterfinal. I mean, there was talk during Greg Berhalter's reign of even making a semifinal, going further than any team had gone before, at least in the modern era. So, I think that's the expectation. It is an expanded World Cup, so there's a round of 32 game that they're going to have to navigate, and then they'll have to win 2 knockout games, which is something that that would certainly be new territory in the modern era. So I would say those are the expectations, but also, to grow this team, to dip into the youth national teams and try to have an impact there as well. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be managing those squads or those camps on a day-to-day basis, but I think there is an expectation that he is going to be able to help set a direction at those lower levels and make for a little bit more cohesive style of play. Now, we've been hearing that for an awful long time. It seems like every new manager that comes in, they're promising that. But certainly when you bring in a manager of Pochettino's experience, you're hoping that he's going to have an impact, not just with the senior national team, but at all levels on the men's side.
Jules, give us the outsider's perspective on those expectations for U.S. soccer. Quarterfinals with this team under Mauricio Pochettino, is it reasonable for a home World Cup?
I think quarterfinal is fair. I do. I mean, a lot will depend also on the draw and et cetera, but if you just look like that as a blunt objective, I think quarterfinal is fair. And to go back to the question that you asked Kasey just before, the counter argument, what happened at PSG with the front three of Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe, for example, and the squad that he had of superstars, he didn't really feel that comfortable. And let's not forget that this is a manager in the best time of his career who took a squad at Spurs that was a start an average squad, that signed young players or that had young players coming through, that he then made into a superstar squad, really, because that's what happened. And if you look at the times where he had the superstar squad already to start with, it didn't work out. At PSG, it was very simple. The work that he wanted to do tactically, especially, could not be done, not with the players that he had. not with the egos that he had in the dressing room. At Chelsea, we've said, I mean, the club signed him 1,000 players. It was almost impossible to work with. Very, very different. But right now, I think if you were asking him, would you rather have a superstar squad where sometimes it could be difficult to work with because they're superstars and because they're big egos, or a squad of young, talented players or with potential? Let's put it that way. I prefer with potential than talented. With potential, but with the right mentality, with the right work rate, and with him at the helm, I think this could work. And just to finish, I thought Pulisic said something very interesting after the New Zealand game, which, by the way, was dire, that 1-1 draw. He said, we need him now to change the culture. And you guys know better than me, obviously, that this has been a problem for a while now, changing the mentality of this team, of this roster, of this organization as a whole, I guess, and his culture. And I think he could be the right guy because he's different to anybody that the US men's national team had before.
Why don't we take a look at the comments from Christian Pulisic? This was after the 1-1 draw against New Zealand in Cincinnati, speaking about what Mauricio Pochettino could bring to the team. Quote, I hope he brings a culture that is willing to fight, take risks, and win. There are a lot of things that need to change just in the mentality and the culture of the group. I think we have the quality. Hopefully that's the first thing he's going to want to change. Kasey, I'll start with you here. What do you make of the comments here from the captain?
Well, what have we been talking about for a long time is how many fans have been frustrated that the U.S. lost the chip on their shoulder. The thing that always allowed the men's U.S. national team to punch above their weight was just saying, you know what, maybe you're not taking us for what we think we're good enough. We're still being, oh, you're an American, you know, you don't know how to play this sport. And so I think we all took that personally and fought for everything. Now, as supposedly this talent pool is more talented, you still have to have the fight. And the fight's been lacking. And that's obviously what Christian is saying. Now, what I hope that he wasn't saying is to continue take this undue risk out of the back, because every time they try to pass the ball to the back, I fear they're going to concede a goal, but maybe risk in the attacking half of the field.
Can a manager provide fight? I mean, that's what we're talking about. A willing to fight, take risks, and win. Does that come from the team or does that come from the manager?
I believe it comes from every individual player. If you don't have that self-respect,
so then Pochettino's not going to solve the problem.
In theory, no, but maybe you can crack the whip and get them in line, which is what these players are asking for, and it amazes me. And listen, we hear so many times, and we've heard so many times, these players defend Greg Berhalter. We want Greg Berhalter back. He's our buddy, da-da-da.
Well, specifically what they defended was the culture.
And the culture, and now they're saying the opposite, the same players. And it may sound hypocritical, and I'll go back. No player is ever going to shoot himself in the foot and speak ill of their manager. It's just not reasonable. But when the players are asking for this change, and there's certain ways of leading, and Christian Pulisic is the team captain by the armband, but he's not really the leader of this team. He leads by example, but that's not the same way as a Tyler Adams being in the locker room and holding people accountable. Now, in this camp, and I told you what I thought about this camp or this window, you didn't have Tyler Adams, you didn't have Weston McKennie, you didn't have Timothy Weah, you didn't have Anthony Robinson, you didn't have Gio Reyna, Matt Turner didn't start the first game. There are situations here where there are important players who could be on that field who can lead in many different ways, but certainly, and I know it's not just one person's responsibility. If there's a Tyler Adams in that locker room, damn well sure that the halftime of the Canada game, there's being something thrown, there's being something said, there's a finger being pointed. After the New Zealand game, he's irate because he has that pride in his game, the pride in himself, the love for the jersey. And Kasey's right. You know, the U.S. men's national teams of the past never had people question them that way. They can question them tactically, technically. They can question, if they were good enough. But you never once questioned if they had the spirit, the fight, the pride. They always had a chip on their shoulder. The biggest player they had, Clint Dempsey, had the biggest chip on his shoulder. So it's a trickle-down effect. This generation has had every resource given to them, every opportunity at their disposal. And yet here we are talking about an attitude, talking about mentality, talking about culture. I don't understand it. And one manager coming in, shouldn't have to change that, but that's where we are today.
Jeff has been around the program a long time, obviously covered the U.S. men's national team for quite a few years. How far off the right mentality is this group's mentality right now? And do you back Jeff Poch to come in and fix it?
Well, I think one thing that Pochettino can do is set standards. If the standards are slipping, of course, some of that's on the players, but, Pochettino has the ultimate, weapon. He's the one who's dealing out playing time. He can bench guys. If they're not performing up to the standard, if they don't have the right attitude, it's hey, let's try somebody else. So, I think that's one thing that he's going to start doing right away is setting those standards, setting expectations, and hopefully the rest of the team, the rest of the player pool falls in line. It's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how far off they are, because you saw how they played at the World Cup. You've seen how they played at times. It seems like whenever Mexico comes to town, this team is up for it. So they are capable of bringing that chip on their shoulder. They are capable of having that right attitude, but it comes and goes. And so, that's where it's kind of a mixed bag, because it shouldn't be that way. I mean, the attitude, the preparedness, the fight should be there all the time. And the players have admitted it themselves. They admitted it at Copa America, and they alluded to it in these last two friendlies. So I guess I would say they're not far off because they're capable of it, but why is it not there consistently? I think that really is the ultimate challenge that Pochettino is going to face.
Jeff speaks about that standard. I'll tell you why they play against Mexico that way, because that's a standard that they've been told since they were 15 years old. Youth national teams, this is our rival. This is the biggest game we have. You see that green jersey, you have to win. You have to fight. And that's why they're held to that standard. It amazes me that they don't realize that same standard should be held every single time you put that jersey on.
All right, so there it is. Mauricio Pochettino now officially charged of the U.S. men's national team. I do have one more question for you, Jeff. I saw something in an article, I believe it was reported by The Athletic, I want to give them credit, about a potential buyout clause in this contract, which might make some U.S. fans nervous. But I didn't see any details on it. Do you know anything about that buyout clause, whether it exists and what's in it?
Yeah, I was able to confirm that it does exist. A Federation source told me that it's in the, quote, tens of millions, unquote. So I interpret that to mean that it's, 20 million at least. Now, I can think of some entities out there in the soccer world for whom 20 million would not be an impediment at all to trying to wrest away Mauricio Pochettino. But, it could be more than that. So, there is a little bit of a gray area, but that is a considerable amount of money. And I think that would scare away the majority of national teams out there. But, I can think of a few that it wouldn't. So, but I think both sides, and I say both, I'm talking about Pochettino and the USSF, they want to make this work. I mean, obviously Pochettino is taking a big leap into the international game with not one of the traditional powers. So, he's going to be very motivated to make this work. And the Federation has taken the big swing that everybody wanted them to. So, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that Pochettino's a success. So, obviously the hope is that this clause never has to be invoked or is never tested, and that this is a marriage that ends up working out very well for everyone involved.
All right, great stuff. As always, you can read more from Jeff Carlisle over on the website, ESPN.com. You can do the same for Julien Laurent. Jules, thanks for staying up late with us. Same for you as well, Jeff. Great to have you with us on Futbol Americas.